Welcome to Built for This, the podcast where purpose meets performance. Hosted by business strategist and human behavior specialist Carly Pepin, this show dives into the real stories behind high-growth businesses. Let's bring life to your vision. All right, welcome, guys. So today we have an exciting show for you. I have Edris Yousefi here, and he's an entrepreneur and growth strategist with 15 plus years of experience scaling companies across franchising, SaaS, and healthcare technology. He has contributed to over 250 million in enterprise value through brand development, expansion strategy, and operational execution. He has led marketing and growth initiatives for more than 700 locations within nationally recognized licensing systems, managing over 5 million in ad spend while driving multi-market expansion. Edris founded and exited for Analytics, a franchise analytics platform focused on performance and data-driven decision-making. Earlier, he helped scale a wellness concept into a franchise platform that ultimately achieved a successful merger and acquisition. He also led leadership roles in SaaS and healthcare tech, contributing to over 100 million in revenue through enterprise software implementations. He is currently the founder of Lucky Dog Mobile Groomers, a fast-growing brand modernizing pet services through a premium, scalable, mobile-first model. So welcome, Edris. It's really good to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here, and it's a reflective moment here in my bio. I don't ever look back and think about some of the things I've done, and seems to be a lot crazier when you hear it out loud than you remember it. So I'm excited and looking forward to it.
Yeah, it's exciting. It is fun. It's fun to just remember our history every now and then, which we'll dive into a little bit because I know you're doing the dog grooming dynamic today with Lucky Dog, but you have a very great history with franchising. So I'd actually love to find out a little bit more about Franalytics. So when you started that and when you exited, was that something that you had planned on being a franchise model?
Yeah, I think franchising has been something that's been kind of built into our life. We immigrated here to the US, and like most immigrant families, finding our way. My parents took on various jobs, and my mom stumbled her way into working at what ended up being a top 10 franchise brand. And at the time that she joined that company, they were a very small company, and so she was very close with their leadership and worked her way up. And as we grew up, and then as she kind of grew in her career, she ended up becoming a franchisee. And fast forward 20 years, when I started really getting involved with software companies, I'd go home for the holidays and ask my mom how her franchise business is doing, and she would stumble on giving me the right answers of how is my business doing, what do my numbers look like, and I quickly started to see an opportunity where franchises are essentially small businesses at the end of the day, and small business owners are what I kind of joke, firefighters. They're always putting out fires. And so whether they're hiring folks, there's something going on in their brick and mortar business, doing payroll, taxes, and they have a tough time prioritizing their schedule, and then also understanding how their business is performing, because they're just trying to keep the ship afloat. And so um, I kind of took that opportunity over that Christmas break after asking those questions and trying to dig into it with her, and went back and, looked across the spectrum and realized, this is not a single problem. This is a problem across not only her franchise system, but many, many franchise systems. And at the time, I was working with a company that was developing machine learning technology, and I was working very closely with engineers on how you take data and you run machine learning algorithms to start understanding trends. And this was before an AI boom, and so machine learning was essentially the initial phases of AI. And I started developing what's very common now, but it wasn't then, a dashboard, and said, okay, if I plug in all of this data, have all this data in spreadsheets and stuff like that, what is it going to tell me? And can it tell me that clearly? And can it show me, where I stand today as a business, where I'm headed, before it's too late? And so, in a very a rough sketch. I kind of drafted and inputted a lot of data, mocked up dashboards, and then I hired the same engineers that was working at the company at the time to basically create a demo software for me. I went around and set up meetings. I said, "Hey, look, I can help your business owners have a better understanding of their business." I was 24, 25 at the time, and just started kind of pitching this idea. I didn't actually have a software, and so I held a bunch of meetings, and I was on a ski trip maybe a couple months later, and I got a call from a chief information officer at a large franchise company and said, "Hey, we'd like to sign up. Can you get us a contract? And we'd like to use your software." I was in the middle of the mountains and I lost service, and so I was like, "Turn around, we got to go back." And it was kind of obviously a big milestone moment for me. And I realized that there was a value there in the process that I had set up. The whole theory of it was give people tools to be successful so they can run good businesses. Unfortunately, at the time, I didn't have a tool, so I quickly scrambled to actually build a tool. And it was a fun journey. I got to learn a lot about software development, and then over the course of my career, just being around a lot of franchise owners, it teaches you a lot about who people are. At the end of the day, I've focused a lot of my time on people, and people drive businesses, they drive the economy and things like that, and so solving people problems usually is a good thing. um and started scaling that business. Unfortunately, I don't think I was old enough, or had the line of sight, but so I exited a little bit early and kind of went back to doing some other different things. But it was a great lesson and a great opportunity, and I wish I would have held on longer with it. So
Well, that's cool. I was gonna ask you about like biggest lessons learned, but it sounds like one of them is just I wish I'd held on longer.
Yeah, it got to a point where I got approached by private equity to absorb the software and the technology, and then they also actually were more interested in me, and so they were
Mm.
kind of buying me, but they knew the path to do that was to kind of acquire my software. And again, I was just a little younger in my career, and so it seemed like a quote unquote safe move. I think if that was the case today, it would have definitely been a different answer and response. And so I have more nerves now and more resources. And so it's just, they got me at the right time.
Yeah. Oh, that's very, very interesting. And I'm curious, like, how much time did you take between Friendlytics and Lucky Dog? Did you start it kind of quickly after?
No, I kind of basically stepped away from franchising for the most part after that, and I focused a lot on healthcare and software companies. For about a handful of years, I was, pretty ingrained in that world, going back and forth between San Francisco and fully, on a digital path.
Mhm.
It was 2023 where, this opportunity kind of came back up, and it almost reignited different parts of my brain to kind of get back into a people business and a different world than Silicon Valley, and it enlightened me in different ways and got me excited again. So there's a little bit of break there between all that.
That's awesome. I'm curious too, because what made you decide to do Lucky Dog? What made you decide to get into mobile grooming? Because it sounds like you have an extensive background in software at this point.
Yeah, I think we, on a personal level, we were going through a lot of changes in my household. We were, expecting our first child, and we have a dog who's unfortunately not with us anymore. But at the time, we had a 14-year-old Yorkie, and my partner had been mobile dog grooming our dog for many years, even before she had met me. And so I kind of got introduced to the services. Our relationship got built, and as we were expecting our first child, an opportunity came up for her to work for our mobile dog groomer. And she used some help with the business. And, I got to kind of be on the sidelines, listening and seeing and observing, how this lady's business was being run. And, those were the intimate moments where like the light bulb started to go off, day after day, just kind of hearing, the conversations that they were having, the challenges that they were having. And my entrepreneur mind quickly went to problem solving and thinking about how do you scale something like this. And, so and getting a close seat to the industry and the business, started opening my eyes to, okay, there's got to be a better way to do this. There's a lot of fragmentation in the industry. There's a lot of people that don't know how to really run a good business for this. And but maybe more importantly, we have a dog and that service just made so much sense to me. We never took our dog to a salon to have them groomed. And so I fell in love with the service first. And then I think the opportunity then was kind of in our face, and it was up to me to kind of figure out, what are we going to do about it? And so and that was really the ignition to everything that we've gotten to at this point.
That's really fun. It's exciting. You remind me of my husband every time he talks or we go somewhere. I'll go to a store and then he'll start talking to someone and he'll start talking about business and all of a sudden we're talking about their problems. And, yeah. So it reminds me of that. We haven't created a company out of it yet, but kind of we did. Now we do business consulting. But I
I
love
think
that dynamic.
I've scared my partner to know. She knows that any moment I will do something, and so every time I start bringing up an idea, she tries to shoot it down before I let it simmer too long, or if I start like really trying to solve for it. So
That's awesome. She's like, let's make sure that this is possible and probable before we go too far. She
yeah,
sounds like a
exactly.
good teammate to have. Um, and I know with Lucky Dog as well, like you guys are using a licensing model instead of the traditional franchising. So I'm curious, what was it about franchising that you didn't like to have you switch into the licensing model?
Yeah, and there are pieces of franchising and licensing that are similar, and then there's obviously areas where they're different. It wasn't necessarily the fact that I didn't like franchising. I think it's more, when you look at a business, and this is a question that a lot of owners need to have, whether they're founders and they're starting a business. I think they get this common perception that, hey, just franchise your business and scale it. And, not every business is meant to be franchised. And going down that road many, many years ago, I know the process it takes to become a franchise. And, there's a time aspect to it. It typically takes anywhere from 1 to 2 years to go through the whole process, getting all your documentation, registration in order, getting approved to be a franchise. Obviously involves a lot of money as well. And then it requires registration in every state. And so most people don't know this, but if, let's say, I'm a franchise here in Texas and I sold a license to a franchisee in Nebraska, you have to actually get registered as a franchise in the state of Nebraska before you can even offer that. And so there's the time aspect, a cost, and a speed to scale. But those really are table stakes for being a franchise no matter what. I think more importantly, it came down to, does this business need to be a franchise or not? And the biggest difference in a franchise and a license is overbearing control.
Mhm.
And the example I like to give is, if I'm a McDonald's franchise owner, McDonald's corporate will say every time you make a Big Mac, you want to have a lot of brand control and consistency, right? And so when you make that Big Mac, you're going to put two patties, two pieces of cheese, and some onions and a Mac sauce on there. You're not going to put one patty. You're not going to put three patties. This is the way you do it over and over again, and just repeat the system. Um, and with licensing, there is almost no control. I cannot provide any control. Now they can't, damage or harm the brand or the marks of the license. But as it relates to dog grooming, all of our owners, including myself, I'm not a dog groomer. And when it comes to dog grooming, there's not a repeatable way and a finite, definition to say this is how you groom a dog every time. Now, there's obviously, packages and processes in terms of how you'd want to do it, but every dog grooming experience is different and it's personalized. And so that could mean, a certain dog, we might bathe the dog first, and then maybe we're cutting their nails, and maybe they're a short-haired dog versus maybe they're a long-haired dog, and we're going to cut the dog's hair first before we give it a bath. And so there's a lot of operational maybe SOPs that are typical in a franchise business because they want you to follow a playbook. Um, the licensing model almost kind of gives you a freedom of running your business in your own way. And so not only from a process standpoint, but also from an offering standpoint. And so, for example, in some of our locations, even though we're called Lucky Dog, we groom cats, and cats are a big package, and they have the luxury and the flexibility to offer that service and create a package for them and provide that service. And so the freedom actually becomes an opportunity for folks with licensing to kind of shape the business their own way. I think not everyone is maybe comfortable with that. Some people are like to be told what to do and how to run a business, and they don't want to get creative or think at all. And that's okay. But, our business, I think is a little operationally light where you can, run it through a licensing model.
Hey everyone, it's Carly. If you're really resonating with what we're talking about and want to get clear on what truly drives you, what your core values are, head on over to my website. In the tools and tips section, there is a free values assessment. And this is a quick exercise that's going to help you to uncover what actually matters most with you so you can lead and live with more clarity, fulfillment, and momentum. Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, that's very cool. So you're attracting a significant quantity of entrepreneur types in this model, I'm imagining. And I'm curious as well. So when you create this model with the licensing for them, what would you say is kind of similar to franchising in the things that you provide for them to ensure that they have what they need to be set up and good to go?
Yeah, I think, providing them a framework of how to run a business, providing a lot of guidance, providing them resources and tools. I think it's very easy for people to throw books at people and processes and expect people to read them and then follow them and things like that. And, a lot of our business development happens in those, conversations that we have on the first day or when they call me and say, what do I do in this situation? And there's not necessarily a playbook for those things. And so, providing that high touch support, providing a lot of resources and experience to be able to point to, here's how we've done it, here's how others have done it in this market or in this situation. And so, just giving them expert guidance with a lot of support so that they have the confidence to go figure it out. I think a lot of people get it maybe a little confused that, we're building a business, but in a lot of way, I'm building entrepreneurs. And a lot of our folks uh, don't have any business background. They have never built their own business. And this is a good business for folks that, are willing to kind of take that leap, but they're scared. They've never built one before. So the moving pieces and the parts of this business are a little bit easier. You have a little bit more flexibility. You're not opening a big restaurant where you have all these different processes and people that you have to hire and manage. And so, I kind of call it a great starter business for folks that are looking to kind of make that leap from a corporate world or a structured world. And then it's my job to set them up for success, provide them confidence, and then watch them grow. And it's been and probably the most rewarding part about it is seeing people find this confidence that they have probably have never had before in their life, that they never even knew that they had, and then become their own owner, and just kind of take control of their life.
And it is really inspiring. It's definitely probably something that's cool to see. Yeah. Um, I'm curious too, because even like at the scale it's at now, because how many mobile groomers do you have out there?
In terms of groomers, we probably have, I'd say around anywhere from 150 to 180, maybe,
Mm,
maybe
okay.
close to 200. It's changing every day. We have a handful of launches this month, and then people are continuing to grow their existing fleet and their business, and so I'm losing track of it myself a little bit.
That's fine. I'm curious, like because as you stated, that is a high touch dynamic where you're helping them to grow, you're helping them to become those entrepreneurs. There's a lot of people. So how do you have that structured on the back end to ensure that you're able to help them grow your business or their business while not getting too overwhelmed themselves?
Yeah, I think, what I've realized and this past year was an explosive growth year for us. We expanded into, I'd say, I think 14 or 15 states in the calendar year of 2025, and around 20, 30 cities. And being a part of companies in the past where you go through these growth milestones, there's always these points where You have to do more than you can handle. And then, we always had a joke in the SaaS world is help is on the way, and so we're waiting for funding to hire more folks. But, today you need to wear a couple hats and things like that. But in the back of my mind, during those growth periods that we had where we had a lot of places launching, I'm constantly building in layers and delegation to help systemize as much as possible. And it's never going to be perfect. And this is, I think, where my SaaS background comes in, because a lot of people that have been part of startups know that it's chaotic and you have to get comfortable with chaos. And when you do that for so long, it kind of becomes muscle memory, and it's not for everyone, but you realize that you still solve the problems and you still, find solutions for the long term, systems and scalable, pieces of your business. And so what I really focused on though was what are the areas that I think are important, that other people can do, and then what are the areas that are important that no one else can do but me, and how do I delegate those things that I think other folks can do? So marketing agencies, digital agencies to help set up things, a lot of things I used to do on my own for each location, different vendors and suppliers, different third-party agencies that help with the scheduling, the client communication, things like that. And I continue to try to leave my space and my time where it's most valuable, which is working one-on-one with the owners and, being their coach, being their consult, and being their guidance, as they go through an initial phase of launching and, the crash course. So, I'm a business owner now and I have to, do this. And my back's against the wall, and, here I am, and kind of being that calm in the storm as well for them, and then working through their scenarios. And inevitably, I get to again watch them go through it, and the calls become a little less, and they become a little bit more confident, and they continue to kind of grow, and then they don't need me as much. And so I become an empty nester again until we have new licensees that kind of come on board.
That's awesome. It is fun though. It is fun. It's
Yeah.
very fun to have that opportunity to mentor individuals. I'm curious too, is there a way that these individuals also connect with each other?
Yeah, so that was a big part of, our brand as we grow. A lot of folks, and again, we have been growing very organically. I don't necessarily go out in an extensive way to solicit folks to come into the system. I'm not desperate for bringing in folks, and so we've had a lot of organic growth. But as we started bringing in this network, I again started to see opportunities where we had some gaps with our technology and tools. And one of them was, just a way, how do you communicate with 200 groomers? The way I did it when we started was it was on my phone. And I realized I don't want that many text messages on my phone. I have too much going on. And so we started with, creating a core communication app, but for our internal use. And then we started phasing in, okay, so I can communicate with my business. How do I now connect this with other business owners? And then so now we have business owners groups in there, and they can talk to each other, bounce off ideas. Um, One of the things, being a part of one of the fastest growing franchise company in the country, I realize is that your owners are vital to your growth. And you'll be surprised that these folks come from different walks of life. They have different skill sets, and they will try different things. And that is actually your advantage. You want folks that are doing different things, trying different
Mhm.
things, seeing what works, sharing those ideas, sharing maybe what doesn't work. Maybe that's even a better idea. So don't do
Yeah,
that. And so, making sure that I create the bridges and opportunities for folks to be able to engage and talk to each other and share those things, is important. That's really my fiduciary responsibility to help, the overall brand grow.
that's cool. I imagine they really enjoy having that community dynamic as well, especially like the newcomers and talking to some of the people who have been doing it for longer and having that level of understanding with what each
Yeah.
other's going through.
And I actually intentionally don't try to introduce them too early into the network. I think sometimes it's important for folks to, before they find a crowd, I think everyone is very used to when you walk into a restaurant or bar, if you're the only one there, you're going to find someone to go talk to. It's hard to be alone by yourself, right? And
Yeah.
I'm intentional about actually not letting them quickly attach themselves to a person or a group. And I want them to focus on, how do I build this business for me? Because at the end of the day, this is your business and you need to know how to run it. And
Mhm.
so I want to make sure they understand their business first, get it up and going, and then have them really start engaging with folks, because it also helps you decipher the inputs and the opinions that you're getting from folks. And so if you haven't done it yourself and all you're hearing is opinions from folks,
Mhm.
you might not have carved your own path or idea of how you want to do it. And you're just, basically soliciting other people's advice and you're going about it their way instead of your way. And again, being around so many different franchisees, I've seen so many different personalities, and people think personality is a weakness, but the more you understand your own personality and your strengths and weaknesses,
Mhm.
you become a better owner and operator.
That's really cool. I
So I
love
don't
that
want to
you do
hide that
that.
voice, that they
Yeah.
have inside of them.
Yeah, it's cool because like you nailed something pretty cool. So like in the human behavior dynamic, it is we'll go out and we'll compare ourselves to other people. We inject them as an authority because they've just gotten further along than we have. It's just a time thing too. And then all of a sudden we're trying to make our business, our life look like someone else's instead of our own. So I love you're like, nope, we're not even gonna start that way. I want you
Yeah.
to find your way. I want you to find that voice inside and figure out what works for you. It kind of takes a lot of the imposter syndrome dynamic out, as opposed to them having to deal with that in addition to everything else that they're managing.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I think also at the beginning when you're launching a business, it just feels overwhelming. And
Yeah.
and so I'm trying to be that little voice at the end of the tunnel. Just listen to me, or like follow this direction first to come up, follow the light and get out of there. And then I think hearing other things, other ideas, becomes easier to understand and maybe execute, without getting too overwhelmed.
Yeah, no, it's very smart. I love that. And I'm curious too because I know that you're creating, well, you have this dynamic where you're bringing in all these different softwares. If something is valid and usable and helping these individuals in their day to day, is there ever a thought that maybe you would create a software specifically for Lucky Dog because you have again, pretty expensive background there?
Yeah, yeah. So we do. So we have, I mean, what we have today, we do have a what we call a Lucky Dog HQ. It's a mobile app that's accessible on Apple and Google Play stores, and this is an internal app for our owners and operators. Right now, again, the scope is limited, and it's really solving a lot of our core day-to-day executional problems. We do leverage other software that's designed for mobile grooming that is a little bit more comprehensive in terms of the client-facing side of the appointment scheduling, managing, the CRM, the payment processing, for the groomers, the route optimization and things like that. And I've wrestled with the idea of also bringing that in as well and just building a comprehensive in-house software. Um, it's a tricky balance, between cost and management. With my experience, developing software, it's not just about building it, but it's about maintaining it. And the challenge I face is that the bigger we get, the harder it is to migrate. So it's one of those things that, the sooner you do it, the better in some ways. But
Yeah.
I'm trying to be very mindful of, what we're doing today and what works. And I get approached quite often about people telling me different ideas and different services or different products that we should offer. I'm in a wonderful category. It's pets. It's a very popular category. And we're also providing pet services, which is an even hotter sector. And people feel emboldened to give me ideas and these things. And um, whether I'm narrow-minded or not, one of the themes I've had with our success and scale is that to not break what's what's working. And sometimes simple things are okay. And you don't need to offer 40 million things. And you don't need to offer different lines of service and different revenue streams and things like that initially. Now, that might change over time, but I look at some of the brands that are most successful. Let's just, think about it from a service business. When you go to an In and Out or,
Mhm.
Raising Cane's is very popular in the news right now in terms of their business. they're offering one item. It's
Yeah.
chicken, it's a burger, and you look at other brands where they're offering a lot of things like a Wendy's and some of these other brands, and they're, offering so many different products. It's making it hard for consumers to choose. So I'd rather kind of be in the lane where we're offering and doing something really good and doing that over and over again than trying to overwhelm, our owners and operators as well as our consumers with too many options and too many lines of service or products. So,
Yeah, that definitely makes sense. I love that. And I'm curious too, because even with the company, you have and own and operate fleets in Houston and Austin. So what made you decide to do that instead of just licensing those out?
so when we first started this business, I had the intention of licensing it, but we were also owning and operating the business. And I love owning and operating the business. I think, one, we love the service. These are cities that I've been born and raised in and grew up in, and I love providing, the impact that we're making here in Houston. We've serviced, I would say, over 50,000 dogs over the last couple of years. And
Mhm.
so, um, it's something that I don't think I'll ever give up. I think it's important to be an owner and operator. And, when I have conversations with licensees, I get to come to them from a place of, hey, I'm in the trenches with you. Let me tell you from my experience, this is how it works. I'm not in an ivory tower that's, giving you opinion or ideas of how to run a business. And so I think it's been important for us to have a ground for us to run a business, validate it, scale it. It gives us an opportunity to try different things as well, whether it's, with groomers, whether it's with our vans, whether it's potentially different services or pricing and things like that, or even marketing strategies. And so I think it's always important to have, kind of your own corporate footprint. And sadly, a lot of our, national competitors actually don't own and operate any of their businesses. And it's shocking to me because I personally, if I was shopping around trying to start a business and someone was selling me a business, I would ask them, how is it going? How is your business running? And if you've never owned and operated a business and you're just selling the idea of one, that to me is a little bit of a red flag.
Mhm. Okay. Yeah, that makes sense too. I'm curious as well, like when with your core team, how many people are on the core team to support these licensees, the system?
Yeah, so right now we have, I'd say a core team about 8 folks. We have a few partner agencies that, support a lot of different areas of the business too, from, supply management, marketing and digital, PR, things like that. And so, we have partner agencies that obviously they have, extensive staff members and resources. But, from a core team, it's around 7 to 8 people.
Okay, that's pretty good. That's a nice lean team.
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
let's keep it lean. And, it again, I think being lean, having a corporate footprint, not having essentially anyone to report to, it gives me and our business flexibility and clarity of how we want to grow. And, most cases, most businesses, they have a lot of overhead, or they have a board, or they have, private equity or VC backing, or they're a public company and they have to make decisions maybe based not on what they would like to do, but because they have to do it. And, having the discretion of growing the way we want to grow, bringing in the folks we want to bring in, maybe not doing certain things, um, it gives you a sense of clarity and calmness that I think is refreshing. And, I tell licensees all the time, if you don't want to do this business, please don't. I would
Mhm.
go to bed very, very happy knowing that I didn't, coerce or, make someone do something that they didn't want to do. Um, I don't think there's probably any franchise brand that would ever use that line in a sales process, because they have quotas to make, they have overhead to hit. Maybe they don't own any corporate trucks. They're very incentivized and motivated by selling licenses. And it gives you rose-colored glasses because your decision
Yeah.
making changes, and you might qualify folks that maybe should not be qualified. You might let them open locations that, are not going to do well, but you're so um, hampered by, goals that you have to hit, costs that you have to manage, and things like that. So, being lean, flexible, and in
Mhm.
control is where I like to be, and has gotten us here. So.
That's cool. It's interesting you say that. I was part of a licensing group for a year, and I'm very grateful I did it because it was very cool, the education piece. I love that. But it's funny because they're doing what you're saying. They're trying to get the sales quota. So no matter what, I would have signed up for the info and the education. But that churn that I saw was insane. Like I have never seen so much churn and in and outs of people in that model. It was crazy. I'm still connected. I made some good friends there and I'm still connected and some of them stayed and the churn is still happening because they're so focused on the number that they just keep bringing in people that actually aren't a fit. And technically I'm just a fit for the education. I wasn't fit for the licensing model, just the education dynamic. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's people that have maybe never got into franchising maybe aren't aware of this, but folks that have been around the franchising industry or have open franchises, unfortunately, it gets a bad rap. And
Yeah.
it's a shame because franchising is a great framework, whether it's franchising or licensing, it's a great framework for folks to start a small business and own and operate business. But unfortunately, there's a lot of concepts and corporations, and there's a lot of greed and misintention that's done that it unfortunately hurts a lot of people. I mean, I've heard horror stories, and I've seen it so many times where franchise concepts have sold people a pipe dream. Hey, come open this, massage concept or a nail concept or a food, concept. And people, they're in their 40s and 50s, they've worked their whole career. They're looking for, an off ramp for their retirement or for their kids. And they pour their life savings, go take out,
Mhm.
massive loans, maybe even a loan against their own house, and go open these businesses and they fail. And that happens honestly very, very frequently. And so this is where it becomes a bad rap for folks. It makes it look like, oh, it's a sleazy franchise concept, or the sales guy, got someone in there and they just, took their money essentially. And so it's something I'm trying to rewrite just in our space and our conversations with folks about helping them set up for success, and just seeing the damage that has been done by other folks in different businesses and people. It's something that I'm very conscious of. I don't want to live with that, and I will never do that to someone. I will do my best ability to set someone up for success, and it's not worth it for me to, put that type of risk or problem on someone's, decision making. So.
Hey everyone, it's Carly. So, if this conversation is really hitting home and you want to get a real snapshot of what's working and what's not in your business, head on over to my website in the tools and tips section and you can have the business performance health check. In just about 15 minutes, you're going to see where the friction is and where your next growth opportunity lies within your company. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I think it's a smart move too, because then it's like the referrals, you don't get the churn rate that you're getting in a normal dynamic. I get this. This also happens a lot in the coaching world. People buy these insane packages and all these coaching things. And then by the time I get to them, they're like a little bit traumatized by coaching, which is
Well,
fair. Yeah, it's
word gets
totally
out
fair.
fast. Yes.
Yes, and they're all like, yeah, a little bit traumatized by it. And again, I'll be like, that's fair. I completely understand. And you have to rebuild that level of trust if they're a fit. But it is that dynamic is like if you're just being honest, if you're just being truthful, if you're looking out for them and making sure that this is the right match, then you get the repeats, you get the referrals. Like they're gonna definitely be someone who shines within the company. So I love that you're doing that. Is there a way when you're connecting with people that you connect with them to? Like, do you just ask them certain questions to make sure that not only it's a fit for you guys, but it's a fit for them?
Yeah, and again, this is, I think, where we have kind of, a lot of control and delegation of how we qualify folks, who we want to qualify, who we want to maybe, stretch our limits on. I'll give you an example. We had a lady who came to us. She's actually a former groomer. And so up to this point, we have no groomers that are owner operators. All of our licensees are owners, they're business owners. And so they've never groomed a dog before. They're good business owners. They know how to hire groomers and scale a business, but they've actually never been a groomer. We had a groomer that reached out to us in the Midwest. And we've had plenty of them reach out to us. Unfortunately, most of them have not, been in a financial position to be able to, get the capital they need to start a business, but they want to. This lady happened to have done an amazing job over the last 5 years, saving up, thousands and thousands of dollars, showing her dedication and her grit to want to start a business. And, I've had multiple conversations with her, and she's mentioned to me she's gone to different franchise concepts, asking them if she can, become an owner and operator. Her financial situation right now to cover all the costs isn't necessarily there. She can't get lending for it.
Mm.
um, it's not just lending, but you have to pay a franchise fee. But one of the biggest fees after that is being able to acquire a van. And she resonated so much with me, and some of the things I've heard and seen, and even my family's experience, that I wanted to give her a chance. And
Yeah.
she was still debating between going with us and another franchise concept. And while we're in this process, I told her, if you cannot qualify for getting a van, I don't want to sign you up. There's no point in me signing you up, collecting some sort of license fee or franchise fee, and then you can't get a van. How are you going
Yeah.
to run a business? So I actually reverse engineered. I said, I will work with you. Let's go see if we can get you qualified to get a van first, and then I'll work with you on the actual licensing side. While we are in that process, she actually told me that she was talking to a franchise competitor, I suppose, and they actually told her the opposite. She
Mhm.
kept asking them, "Am I going to be able to get a van?" And they couldn't give her that answer, but they were trying to force her into signing up for the franchise and just told them to pay her the fee. And so,
Yeah.
the decision kind of became very clear to her of like where
This is
people
not the
stand
company.
morally.
Yeah.
And
Yeah, they're
so
not gonna help me. Yeah.
But, that's a tangent to your question. I think there's obviously financial qualifications and things like that
Mhm.
that we look for. There's a personality fit that we want to make sure, we've got such a great culture right now. There's a lot of great things happening. And so it's very exciting in our specific company. And so we're trying to maintain that as much as possible. But I think, I ask a handful of questions that I think are really important to me is, what is your motivation? And I'm looking for things beyond money. And so,
Yeah.
hearing about, people wanting to change their life, and doing something for beyond the financial means of it, excites me because, as you probably know and see, money can come and go, and there's many ways to make money. And so, yes, this is a good industry and there's a lot of opportunity in it, but, when you are growing at the size that we're growing at, I'm still looking for brand advocates. I'm looking for people that believe in what we're doing, believe in our brand, and can kind of carry that torch, versus someone that's willing to just cut a check or do it for a financial gain. And so there's plenty of people that have money that will cut a check, and I'm, not looking for those. I'm looking for people that
Yeah.
really live and breathe and die for the business. So.
Yeah, you have a lot of human behavior instilled in this is the second thing that I like just catching this dynamic too. This one's so important. I know you sort of like deterred imposter syndrome in the beginning for a little while, which is really helpful. But this one's really important too because it's finding the meaning beyond just the business, right? Like if someone's coming and they're like, I just want a business, and they've kind of got all these fantasies around it, without that driver behind it, the thing that makes it truly important, which is really the thing we wake up and do this for every day. People are generally not motivated. They're not going to get to the other side. They're not going to go through the challenges. So it's cool you've got this other dynamic instilled in there.
Yeah, and I think,
Mm.
again, it just goes back to I was part of a high growth franchise concept, and every month we would get um a shipment, let's just call it, of 40 franchisees that were, signed up through, you know,
Yeah.
a robust sales team. And these are people opening locations in many, many different cities and states. And they would come to our corporate office, and we would internally kind of joke. We could meet 40 of them, and within an hour we would be able to tell these 5 or 10 are gonna be successful. These 20 are gonna have a tough time, and these 10, good luck to them because I don't think they're gonna be a fit. And you can just kind of pick that up pretty quickly. And so when you meet so many franchisees, you realize that it doesn't matter that what business that they're invested in. It
Hmm.
comes down to the person. And I could put my best franchisees in any concept and they would find a way to be successful. And I could put the worst ones in the best concept and they still won't be successful. And so you quickly realize this has nothing to do with the concept. The concept is just the framework and the feel for you to run a business, but you need someone to drive it. And so the people matter at the end of the day. And you can kind of, when you see so many of them, you can kind of spot, those folks. You'll have some surprises here and there. You're like, oh, I don't know about you. And then they turn out great.
Yeah.
And they pick it up. But, for the most part, you pick it up pretty early if they have the grit to do it. So,
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And so I'm curious too a little bit about the scaling dynamic because in the beginning, February 2020, you had one truck, right? So 2003, you have the one truck, and now you have a significant quantity of vans present day. So what did that drive? Like, what actually drove that growth? Walk me through that a little bit.
yeah, we got our first truck. I think, you know, at a big scale, let's just look at a big market, Houston, LA, Chicago. There's millions of people that live in the city,
Yeah.
and half of them have dogs, and half of those have more than one dog. And so you start like realizing it's one of those things. We had our first truck, and we were fully booked, and we're servicing appointments. And every time I drive around, I'm like looking at an apartment building. I'm like, man, there's like 300 people that live there. I bet you 100 of them have a dog. And then you start looking at the world in a different lens. Like there's dogs everywhere. And, one truck can only do so many dogs, per week, per month. And so as you scale this business, it's pretty clear when you're topped out and you need to, go get another truck and start, growing your business or hire another groomer. And so I think it was maybe about a month into our business where I had flown out to LA, drove back a bus personally, and I told myself I would never do that again. It wasn't a month later before I literally drove uh, another bus from LA all the way back to Houston again, and I got our second bus. And so, we have a common saying that we have here. We go block by block, and so we build this business van by van, block by block. Um, we plant a lot of seeds. We have a lot of new markets at launch, and we're just first trying to get them to understand how to run the business properly, set them up for
Mhm.
success, and then let the demand kind of carry itself and the reputation. This is an emotional business, and so we get a lot of referrals and rebooking that come from providing a great service. And as we provide great service, our business flourishes and there's opportunity to grow it. And so, adding the right folks, adding new locations, meeting the demand, requires us to scale. And, we've spent a lot of time also getting our vertical integration. And so right now at our facility, we have over 15 vans being built this month. And so making sure that the environment that the groomers use, that the owners have in their hand is a working vehicle that has all the things they need to do their job well and it's consistent, is important too. So we have to take a step back a little bit and make sure, from a van standpoint that we have on the road, these are reliable working vehicles. And then again, just empowering the owners to be able to launch successfully, market correctly, create good systems in place, and then, find opportunities for them to keep adding vans. And, I'm happy to say today, we're over 100 vans. I don't think anyone has grown that fast, in 36 months or 37 months.
Mhm.
So, and we're excited about that.
Well, what's exciting too is I know you guys are launching in London, which I think is coming very soon. So tell me a little bit about that, because what made you decide to go global?
Yes, next week actually, I
It's
will
exciting.
be traveling to London and helping prepare for their launch. As we were expanding across the East Coast and the Midwest in 2025, I had some interest internationally reach out to me. as we started having conversation with different folks in Mexico, Canada, Israel, India, China. I've talked with many folks that are very interested in those markets. I was very shy about, thinking that this could be something that would expand internationally. Um, and there was a handful of conversations that I had with some of these folks where when I started doing market analysis in these markets, I'm realizing mobile dog grooming exists right now in those markets. And so that was an eye opener to me. Seeing that there's a mobile dog grooming company in New Delhi, India, made me realize that this is not a consumer based, a US consumer based service only. And I began talking to different international franchise brokers and multi-unit broking companies across the European countries, and one of them happened to just fall in love with our brand and find a good partner for me. And London just seems like a good natural fit for us. Obviously, English speaking country. Some of our tools and technology works seamlessly with our route optimization, our software, our payment processing. And so, before we go any further, it was a good natural step for us to kind of go across the pond and really plant a flag in the UK area. So,
That's exciting. So that's the start, and then I imagine you're kind of working with these other countries to see how to continue and carry forward.
yep, yeah, exactly. And I think again, one of my biggest core basically mission is to make sure I don't mess this up. And by that I mean, I want to make sure we don't bend our rules and bring in folks or put ourselves in a position that overstretches our ability to be successful. And you kind of made a point earlier about, you know, once people fail or mess up, or there's churn, that becomes a different animal. We're very fortunate at a point where we have had nothing but success. And, my goal is to kind of maintain that as much as possible. No, not everything is preventable, but, I
Yeah.
want to put our company in a position where, we do strategic things, take calculated risks, but not overextend ourselves for the sake of overextending it just to say we did something. And so, trying to not have a blemish as much as possible.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, we do the best we can, which is, I think, helpful. It gets everything structured, organized, really running smoothly, and then when it comes up, you can work it out along the
Yeah.
way. Yeah, it's gonna come up. And I'm curious, what does the future look like for you guys? So I know that you're definitely going global. What else is the long-term vision for Lucky Dog?
Yeah, I mean, I think our goal is, we want to be one of the most known and sought after national pet grooming companies in the country. Probably first and foremost, I think international is obviously an exciting opportunity for us, but at the end of the day, we're a US based company, and there's a lot of people and a lot of demand here. And I think most importantly, we want to be known for providing great service, doing the right thing, focusing and prioritizing pet owners. And then, from a business standpoint, creating as many entrepreneurs that want to drive their own success and create their own path in life, um, you know, brings me nothing but joy. And I would love to see hundreds of them. And so, um, we're just kind of at the start of that and, feeling a lot of momentum, but, I expect, we'll have thousands of trucks and hundreds of owners, in a handful of years. And, I bet it's going to be just as common as seeing a UPS truck, seeing a yellow Lucky Dog truck, on every street and every block. So we still have a lot of places to cover, around the country. And, we're excited about kind of bringing, other owners and our brand to other markets too. So
That's exciting. Yeah. Well, thank you for coming today. Thank you for sharing everything. This was very inspiring. And where can people find out more about Lucky Dog, about you?
yeah, I appreciate that. And again, thank you for having me. If you're interested about our services, you can go to luckydogmobilegroomers.com. If you're interested about ownership, you can go to luckydogmobilegroomers.com/own a lucky dog or follow the navigation. If you're interested in me, you can find me on LinkedIn or social media platforms as Edris Yousefi.
Awesome. And I'll make sure to put everything in the show notes for people. And yeah, thank you again for coming. If you guys liked this, if you enjoyed it, like it, share it with someone who you think would find it inspiring. And thank you again, Edris. I really appreciate you sharing this today.
Of course. Thanks for having me.